Welcome back to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Rao, Finder, powered by Moms Rising. I'm so glad you're joining us today. We have another special guest for you, Wendy Cervantes, who is with the Center for Law and Social Policy, also known as CLASP. Welcome, Wendy.
Hi, happy to be here.
I'm so glad you're here, but I'm sad that you're here about a topic that is frustrating, devastating, heartbreaking, all of the things. Right now, we have Donald Trump administration doing mass human rights abuses as he's saying that it's immigration enforcement, but really what we're seeing is mass human rights abuses. What's happening right now, in particular in America, with families who have mixed statuses and children?
Well, what we're seeing right now is like just a broad overreach of the enforcement actions in a way that we've never seen before. And this is, we're basically talking about family separation in our own backyards, where families who have resided in this country for decades even, and who have children who are US born citizens growing up, attending our schools here, are now facing detention and deportation virtually overnight without any opportunity for parents to really truly make informed decisions about their children's care. And so we have, you've probably seen the headlines. We've heard about these recent stories of US citizen kids being quickly deported along with their parents, and a lot of questions about whether or not parents are really able to make decisions about whether they take their kids with them or leave them here. And that's really, really concerning. And, we've seen a violation of due process across the board for many immigrants, but this is touching US citizens, including some of the most vulnerable, which is our US citizen children.
You mentioned a violation of due process that has been in the news, in the headlines, and unfortunately, ICE and the Trump administration are violating due process all over the place. Can you share with our listeners what is due process and where does it come from?
I mean, basically, the idea of due process is that if you have an opportunity to go before a judge to determine the outcome of whatever it is you're being, charged with. And in the case of immigration, and in the cases of an immigration policy, it's a little bit more complicated because but really important because being able to go before an immigration judge can determine whether or not you're able to remain in the country, enter the country, or even what happens to your children, and it allows a judge to be able to consider hardship to those to family members, and in particular if you have US citizen family members. And what we're seeing right now, and there's like a process called expedited removal, which basically speeds up that process and undermines a person's ability to have due process and to have the opportunity to go before a judge and to have a decision made about whether or not they can stay in the country. But for US citizens, there's a whole other level. I mean, you would imagine that if you are a US citizen, you should be entitled, even more so, there should be no question about your access to due process. And yet we're seeing this very opportunity like not be given to even US citizen children in these cases. And what the Trump administration is claiming is that they are providing parents the opportunity to make decisions. There is actually a policy that exists that has been in place since the Obama administration that Tom Homan himself put into place and hasn't been an advocate for, which is called, was formerly called the Parental Interest Directive. It's had some different names over the years, but it's basically been in place to specifically ensure that ICE allows parents to make a decision, whether or not they're going to end up being removed, about their children's care throughout the removal process, and in particular before they're deported. And that can include bringing their children with them. But as you can imagine, all of us who've known what it is to move, even if you're moving from one state to another, you have to make sure you have a lot of things in order, especially when you're moving with your family, to have school records, medical records. We've seen children that are being deported who are undergoing cancer treatment. You want to be able to consult with your doctors, consult with your lawyers, figure out what is truly in the best interest of your children, get passports ready if you, if you're moving to another country. And all of that takes time. And we know for a fact that in some of these recent cases, parents were not afforded that opportunity, were not allowed to talk to their attorneys, even when their attorneys were present in the facility. And they certainly didn't have time from one day to the next to be able to make informed decisions or consult with their children's doctors.
A lot of people don't realize that there is international law related to amnesty as well as national law related to amnesty, and that many of the people who we are talking about in communities that we're talking about, even ICE's own analysis shows that if there was access to attorneys, then they would qualify for amnesty. But it's the lack of access to attorney, lack of access to being able to advocate that is putting a lot of people in really difficult situations. Can you share a little bit about that? Because it's complicated. You know, we definitely have a complicated situation happening, but it's, you know, the amnesty situation is something that is invisible to many people.
Well, I mean, I think when we think of, if you're talking about amnesty in the immigration context, I think what we actually talk about more right now in the current context is something called prosecutorial discretion, which you know, where a judge can actually someone can grant, in some cases a judge, in some cases an immigration official, can grant some sort of relief or discretion to people who qualify for certain humanitarian reasons. And under previous administrations, the executive branch has you know, technically the executive branch currently still has the authority to implement prosecutorial discretion, meaning that they will not seek to deport someone. They can even go so far as to allow them to have some sort of temporary permission to remain in the country, and even have a work permit so that they can work and support their families while they're here, pending, you know, other opportunities to obtain immigration relief. The executive, you know, this administration is you know, really choosing not to exercise any types of prosecutorial discretion, not to truly prioritize who they take enforcement actions against, and actually widening the net of people that are vulnerable to deportation, to include families that have been here for a long time, who are have deep roots in this country, and who have children that are growing up here. And they're even looking to expand the number of people who could potentially be undocumented, essentially growing the undocumented population by stripping away temporary protected status and other forms of immigration relief that families currently have. And many of those people have US citizen children. And also going after the citizenship of babies. Today, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments in the Trump administration's attempt to repeal birthright citizenship. And that, you know, would essentially take away citizenship from our very youngest citizens, infants, and at a very critical time in their life. And actually, recent research has found that should this repeal of birthright citizenship move forward, there would be 225,000 children born every year without the ability to access birthright citizenship.
It's really, really a devastating situation. When we're talking about birthright citizenship, where did those rights come from in the foundation of our laws?
That actually dates back to a civil right to the time of post-slavery, and has been a landmark. It was really critical to the foundation of civil rights in this country and to equity across the board. It dates back to what was known as the Dred Scott decision, which basically you know, pushed back against current thinking of the time right after slavery, that basically said that there used to be a policy in place that children born to slaves were not considered citizens. And so that decision really laid the foundation to be followed by decisions to follow that, to essentially confirm and to basically try to get it into the foundation of our Constitution. It's embedded in the 14th Amendment that children born on US soil are, you know, guaranteed access to citizenship, to really go beyond the prejudices of the day. And the Dred Scott decision confirmed that for children of African Americans, and another decision that came several years later also confirmed that for children of immigrants.
So basically, the Donald Trump administration is trying to overthrow the U.S. Constitution, rights that are protected in the U.S. Constitution, as they're attacking birthright citizenship. Did I hear you right?
Yes, it directly, goes against the U.S. Constitution, and that's why the Supreme Court is now considering this challenge.
This is horrifying. Can you share a little bit about the long-term and short-term impact on families as we are in this experience of really, really, really devastating pushes from the Trump administration?
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
Can you share the impact, the short-term and the long-term impact on families in this moment?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really mind-blowing. We have been, I've been doing this work for a long time, over 2 decades, specifically looking at the impact of immigration policies as they impact children in mixed status families. And what we know is that immigration enforcement, even just like the fear of potentially having your parent taken away, has really devastating impacts to both children's short-term outcomes, both their mental health, their ability to do well in school, their ability to access safety net programs, their economic security. And then it has, especially when when a child is separated from a parent in their early years, that has like a really devastating long-term impacts to their development. And we're talking just about like the threat of deportation. When children are actually do lose a parent as a result of deportation, that's obviously something that they carry with them for the rest of their lives. And that also has a real impact on their ability to do well and their family to be able to thrive and get by, especially if the individual that is deported is a primary breadwinner, which is often the case. And then in cases, we have even seen in the past situations where parents have chosen to take their kids with them. A lot of mothers in particular who have babies or toddlers or young children choose to bring their child with them. And that can be a hard decision, especially if they're going back to a really dangerous country or some sort of situation that they were trying to flee from. But we even know in those circumstances, and like these cases that we're hearing about U.S. citizen kids, going to another country right now, we know that there is real challenges. That's not an easy choice for parents to make, because those kids face real challenges in a country that they were not born in, that they may not speak the language themselves. And in many times, in certain countries, it's not as easy to enroll in school or to enroll in healthcare. If they're U.S. citizen kids, those are children who can eventually come back here and might come back to us, back to this country with less access to education, less access to healthcare throughout their lives, and have more challenges that they need to deal with when they integrate back into U.S. society. So I always tell people there really is no good outcome for children who are impacted by the detention or deportation of a parent.
We only have a couple minutes left, but I know everybody listening and watching wants to know, what can they do? What should people do who are listening and are very concerned?
Well, I mean, I think, there's one, you should certainly reach out to your member of Congress. There is currently a budget reconciliation package that's being considered right now that would essentially provide this administration a blank check and all the funding that they need to take this mass deportation agenda to the next level. So, and they're going to do that by essentially cutting Medicaid, SNAP, and other programs that families rely on all over the country, citizen and non-citizen alike. They're going to cut that take away food and health care from all children and families around the country in order to fund family separation and policies that undermine child well-being. Really, it's going to make what's already a crisis situation far worse. So people can certainly reach out to their members of Congress and, express that they, don't believe that that's the direction we should be moving, and that they don't want their tax dollars to go to a mass deportation machine that's going to separate families and hurt even US citizen children. And they certainly don't want to do that at the expense of programs that are so critical to families around the country. The other thing people can do is, there's a lot of local immigrant rights groups and groups that are working with immigrant families locally. Reach out, find out who they are, find out how you can help your friends and neighbors. And I think there's so much that needs to be done around narrative change and how we talk about immigration and immigrants in our communities. And so I think even just so I think it's important to get engaged as much as you can to like express what you think to members of Congress, but also let your neighbors and your family know. If you know people who are really believing some of the myths and the hateful language that we're hearing from this administration and other anti-immigrant politicians, like let's talk about what we really know about immigrants in our community, and remember our own immigrant roots, and talk more, and really share how immigrants contribute to this country and how important their children are to our country's future.
100%. Also, can they join the Children Thrive Action Network? We have about 15 seconds left, but if they can you share how?
Yes, just check the Children Thrive Action Network can be found at www.childrenthriveaction.org, and we're committed to protecting and supporting children and immigrant families. We're a network of providers and advocates, and we certainly welcome more people to join, and you can get updates about immigration policies in real time.
Thank you so much for being on. Thank you for updating us. Thank you for all you're doing. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you.